All right. Well, for those of you who were here last week, Bongo was talking about the first part of Matthew 15. And if you don't remember, he was talking about the Pharisees and scribes, and Jesus was addressing them, their traditions, and talking about their hearts and what defiles a person, looking at the inward things. And he had said all this in a place called Gennesaret. Gennesaret is near Capernaum, and it's just a little south of Capernaum. And if you remember that picture of the lake, the map of the lake, we got Capernaum and Bethsaida on top, and a little further down on the to the left or to the west is Gennesaret. It's along the lake shore of Galilee also. So Jesus had been there, and so we're picking it up in verse 21. So he's done all this teaching to the Pharisees, and he's really called them out, really. So he leaves there, and we'll pick it up in verse 21. And it says, "And Jesus went away." This is Matthew 15:21. Okay. "And Jesus went away from there being Gennesaret, and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out, and was crying, 'Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon.' But he didn't answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, 'Send her away, for she's crying out after us.' He answered, 'I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.' But she came and knelt before him, saying, 'Lord, help me.' And he answered, 'It's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs.' She said, 'Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table.' Then Jesus answered her, 'O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire.' And her daughter was healed instantly." Now we're going to pick up the next part of that in the latter part of the chapter. But I wanted to start with this story because it's kind of a separate story. But these things are both brought together in a way. We'll see what that is. Jesus has just been in Israel. He's been talking to the different areas in Israel, in the northern part of Israel, and he's gone some into the southern part. But this is the first time he actually gets out and gets way out from the area he is by the Sea of Galilee, and he goes way up to Tyre and Sidon, and the area of Tyre and Sidon. And I was looking at it on a map because it doesn't say exactly where he went, but he went up to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea to the area of Tyre and Sidon, which was about 30 miles, roughly 30 miles, maybe more than that. So he goes up there way over a mountain range, if you look at the map, and he gets up there, so he's withdrawing. He's trying, kind of getting away, taking a little holiday. But this woman comes along, and Matthew addresses her as a Canaanite woman. And she's from this area, and Canaanite meaning to the Jews a very, without going into the whole history of that, Canaanite wasn't the term of endearment. A person who was a Canaanite was looked on as the people that God had allowed the Israelites to conquer, to take over Israel way back, because that's why it was called the land of Canaan. And the Canaanites were had some very evil religious practices. And so when Matthew calls her a Canaanite, he's pointing out that she's really not a Jew. She's not even a Samaritan, which is kind of like a half Jew and half Gentile, but she's a Canaanite, which is completely not a Jew. And Matthew is writing this book, as you know, to the Jews, and so he's pointing out this fact that she is completely different. She's completely outside of the realm of the Israelite people. So, just to give us some background on Tyre and Sidon, let's be reminded of a few things. Let's turn back, if you can. If you have a phone, you may have to navigate a little bit, but back to Matthew 11, chapter 11. Now, I think I talked about this before, I got a lot of notes here, but basically what had happened was Jesus had done a bunch of miracles up in the northern part of the Sea of Galilee, in Chorazin and Bethsaida, and he says to them in verse 21, Matthew 11:21. He says, "Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes." So there's a little bit of context, because Jesus has his mind a little bit about the area up there in Tyre and Sidon. And he says those people up there would have embraced my message if the miracles that have been done here had been done there. So there's one thing about Tyre and Sidon that we can kind of get a background on. Another thing we can look at is Matthew 4. Go even further back, just to kind of get where this woman would have heard about Jesus. Okay, Matthew 4 and verse 25. I'm at the wrong one. Okay. Matthew 4:25 says, "And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan." And then if you go to Luke 6, and you don't have to go there because we're turning around too much, but Luke 6:17, a parallel passage to this, says, "And he came down with him and stood on a level place with a crowd of his disciples, and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem, and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon." So beyond the Jordan and means that area, okay? And so Luke spells it out. These are people had come down from that area before to hear Jesus. So just to kind of give us that background, that's kind of where what had happened. People from Tyre had been there, and this thing we looked at in Matthew 4, that's just prior to the Sermon on the Mount. Now remember us talking about the Sermon on the Mount, right? So just prior to that, the people had come down there to hear that. And this woman may have been one of those people. And the purpose of Jesus' ministry up to this point had only been to Israel. And, this is a little, we look at this passage, and he's talking about, he's only being sent to the people of Israel, the lost sheep of Israel. And then he says to the woman that, what does he say? It's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. That we look at that seems a little harsh, but in the context of how we're going to unpack that is that Jesus was pointing out to her that his ministry was to Israel, but his compassion extended beyond that. And so when this woman came up to him, it's important for us to look at it this way, that the purpose of Jesus' ministry was to Israel. Now, if you go to Romans 15, and maybe I'll just get one person to read this verse, okay? Somebody read Romans 15, verse 8, okay? This is Paul introducing what Jesus came to do to the Romans, okay? Romans 15, verse 8.
"For I tell you that Christ became a servant to the circumcised to show God's truthfulness, in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs."
Read verse 9 too.
"And in order that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. As it is written, therefore I will praise you among the Gentiles and sing to your name."
And he goes on to quote some different passages in the Old Testament about prophecies about the Gentiles, about the gospel or the message of God going beyond Israel. Okay, but the first part of that is talking about Christ, and it says he came as servant to the circumcised, meaning the Jewish people who had who were the circumcised, who had that right in their Judaic practice, to show God's truthfulness in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs. Now, who are the patriarchs? Anybody know?
Abraham,
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You remember that back in Genesis, God had promised the land, and later on he promised a king to Israel, and a bunch of other things, the Messiah, different things. So there was these promises made, and so this verse says that Christ became a servant to the Jews to show God's truthfulness, to show that he was faithful, and to confirm the promises he had made to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and so on, Moses, David, and everybody else, about what would happen in the future when the Messiah would come, when there would be a ruler in Israel, and that there would also be this person who would suffer, as we read in Isaiah. So we have a lot of promises made. We won't go into all that right now, but basically it's saying that Jesus came to confirm the prophecies and the promises made to those people at that time. So when we get back to Matthew, when Jesus is saying in verse 24, he answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." It's important to see that that was his point, the point of his mission on earth. That was the point of his time, as in that short 3 years that he was ministering, was to confirm all the things that had been promised to Israel. Now, if we go further on in the Bible, in the book of Matthew, we get to chapter 28, verse 19, where Jesus tells his disciples to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, right? That's the Great Commission. But at this point, he is confirming the promises to Israel. So, another thing to look at is that, this would be different for the disciples. They don't know exactly what's going on. Here's this woman comes around, and and she's crying out, and Jesus is not answering. He's not picking up the phone. He's not paying any attention to her. It says he didn't answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she's crying out after us." Now, that doesn't necessarily mean send her away without helping her out. It just meant, can you do something here? You're going to get that. It's like the phone keeps ringing. And they're going, what are you doing? Just not paying attention to this person. And they say, send her away. They don't know what Jesus is going to do, but they're kind of confused probably by this. Here's this woman crying out, and Jesus is doing nothing. Now in the context of this, go back to Matthew 10 for a second. Go back to Matthew 10. Remember that there was a time when the disciples were sent out by Jesus, right? He sent out the 12 disciples. And somebody read verse 5 and 6, okay?
These 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel."
So those disciples that were telling Jesus, do something about this woman, they had been told when they went out, you guys don't go to any Gentile town. And it also says, and don't enter any town of the Samaritans. Samaritans, like we said, were half Jewish and half something else. He said, don't even go to them. Only the people of Israel. So they had this context in their teaching. So here's Jesus in this area, and here's this woman calling out to him and crying out to him, and they rightly think, well, maybe he's not going to do anything for her, but maybe he is. But can he do something? Can you do something, Jesus? And so they kind of pick up that phrase for her. They've been told not to go there before. Now, one of the things, as you keep on, if you go back to chapter 10, if you stay in chapter 10 for a second, one of the things that they were told, right, as they're going around Israel, is verse 7, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. So remember, they had come back and they were all excited about being able to cast out demons, right? And I don't know if that's this place or another place, but anyway, they were given the authority to cast out demons. So they had gone around Israel casting out demons. And so this woman had somehow heard about that. And she comes to Jesus and she asks. And this woman's faith is really something. There's several things about it that we need to kind of get a handle on. One of the things is she calls Jesus the Son of David. Now, what does that mean anyway? Being the Son of David, calling Jesus the Son of David.
Does it mean that she understands that he's in David's lineage and therefore fulfilling the prophecy?
Yeah,
the king would come from David.
That the king would come from David. So she's basically calling him the Messiah, the kingly Messiah. So that's one thing about it. So she's acknowledging him as the rightful king over a nation that had conquered her ancestors. That's something that pretty powerful. That she recognizes this is the Son of David, this is the Messiah who is coming to do that, to reign in Israel. And then, like John's woman at the well, this Canaanite woman knew who Jesus was, even seemingly before the disciples. Next, in chapter 16, you find out the disciples confess that Jesus is the Son of God, but at this point, she's understanding that. She's understanding that he has the power over demons. She's understanding that he's the Son of David, the Messiah. And so that's a big point of faith. She knows who Jesus is, right? And so it goes on to say, after this exchange where Jesus tells her it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Incidentally, in this case, the dogs are there's a couple different words for dogs. And in this case, it's talking about little house dogs. Maybe like Shayna's dogs, or these dogs here. They're little dogs that are in the house. Because there was dogs that run wild and were looked down on, or kind of wild dogs. But these are kind of like little dogs, little house dogs. And so that's the meaning of the word that Jesus is using here. So he's not really calling her, a dog. He's saying there's this thing that I'm doing with the people of the household right now. And he says, I'm not going to take that time and that effort and do something else that I've not been told to do. And it's kind of hard to grasp this, until we begin to see that Jesus had to die first before he could have that message of the gospel go out. But we'll go on. But she persists. She says, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Verse 28 says, Then Jesus answered her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire. And her daughter was healed instantly. Now, there's a couple little things about this. In the book of Mark, there's the same story, and there's a couple little details that are different. One of them is that Mark records Jesus as saying, let the children be fed first. Not that he was not going to help her out, but he was going to do what he was supposed to do first. So that's one key thing there. Another thing is that this is one of the only time, probably the only time in Scripture we have a record of Jesus looking at somebody and saying, great is your faith. Your faith is great. So we have a great story of faith, and we're going to come back to that story and look at a couple things as we try to reflect on this for our own lives about this woman's faith, but we're going to get to the faith of the people that are in the next part of the story. So we're going to read on here. It says, verse 29 says, Jesus went on from there and walked beside the Sea of Galilee, and he went up to the mountain and sat down there. And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet, and he healed them. So that the crowd wondered when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they glorified the God of Israel. Now, there's a couple details here that it says that they glorified the God of Israel. Now that kind of gives us a hint that they were not in Israel. And so if you look in the book of Mark, it says that, hang on my notes here. Yeah, Mark 7:31 says, "Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis." So Mark gives the exact location of where this is happening, or the general location, and it's not in Israel. See, everything kind of to the west of the Sea of Galilee, going down to the Dead Sea, everything over that side is Israel. Now, the area of the Decapolis is outside of Israel. And the Decapolis means, what does Decapolis mean if you think of that word? Decapolis. Nobody?
10 something.
10 cities?
10 something, yeah.
10 cities, right. Okay, you are absolutely right.
Yeah,
So there's a region of 10 cities that are outside of, is kind of a Greek area. So now we know that he's on the east side of the Sea of Galilee, okay? He's in Gentile territory. Now, back in chapter 14, we had the feeding of the 5,000, right? And we had that story a couple weeks back. And that was in Israel. That was on the west, the west side of the Sea of Galilee. This is on the east side. So he's in Gentile territory. And it says, Mark actually has another story in there. We won't go to it. It's about this guy who couldn't speak and he couldn't hear. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's good. But anyway, we won't go to that story right now. We'll go to this story in Matthew. And we have a situation where it says, verse 30, "And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet, and he healed them, so that the crowd wondered." Now in Mark, there's a different. It's described differently. Mark says, "So that the crowd wondered." It says that in Matthew, but in Mark 7:37, telling the same story, it says, "They were beyond measure astonished." Now, these people were freaked out. Basically, what was happening is all these people were being brought: the lame, the blind, the crippled. Now, crippled is an interesting word because crippled, in some translations, it says maimed. And there's a scripture back in. Hey, Ryan. There's a scripture back in Matthew 18. Mark 9:43 that says, "If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled." But that word is not actually crippled, because if you thought of your hand being cut off, you would be maimed. You would be missing a limb, and the word actually means bent or crooked, or just unable to be in use. Again, in Matthew 18, which is a couple chapters ahead of us, it's recorded this way: "And if your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame or maimed, than with two hands or feet to be thrown into the eternal fire." So the idea there is that lame would be something wrong with the legs, and crippled was generally something wrong with the hands or the arms. So a good rendition of that would be, instead of saying that the crippled would be healthy, it would be the maimed would be made whole. People were getting things back. There was amazing things happening. And it says they put them at his feet. And the word actually doesn't necessarily mean put. It can also mean kind of thrown or flung or dropped. So we kind of get this picture, okay? Let's get the picture. Jesus is sitting down. He's up on the mountain in the Decapolis. Thousands of people are coming by, bringing. So when you bring somebody that's crippled, or got problems, can't see, whatever is wrong with them, they need to be brought by somebody else. So these people are bringing these people, And Jesus, boom, and they're instantly healed. Boom, and they're healed. And he's doing this for 3 days, and we're going to find out in a second. So we have this incredible thing, and Mark records it this way. He says, they were beyond measure astonished. Now the word astonished here means to strike out, force out. It actually had an original meaning of hitting and knocking somebody out. But it came to have an analogous meaning of being really, I guess in our terms, blown away. In the sense of knocking a person out of their senses, being struck with astonishment, admiration, or amazement. And Mark says this was happening beyond all measure. So these people were freaking out. That's the way to look at it. They're freaking out. They're blown away because hands were being restored. People were being made able to walk again. People were just speaking that could never speak before. And they were just utterly astonished. So when it says they wondered, it's kind of an understatement. But yes, they're like, whoa, we've never seen anything like this. So what happened is they stick around, right? They stick around. The guy gets healed, but they sit there and they want to be with Jesus and hear what he has to say. They're all about it. They're all about staying there. They're sleeping on the ground, as one commentator says, They're sleeping on the ground in the desert out by Decapolis, and they're wanting to be with Jesus. I thought about this the other day. I was thinking about my own experience back before I knew most of you. In 2011, which is a few years ago. Just trying to find my notes here. I should have numbered them. Anyway, in 2011, I got cancer in my right eye, and so I found out my optometrist kind of saw something, went out to one specialist. They found that you got a cancer, you got a melanoma in your eye. And so they were discussing the possible treatments. And so I went down there and I saw this paper, and they had this paper. For some reason, I lost my place here. Oh yeah. Here
You gotta give me an iPad.
I have my computer. I think I just followed that. Anyway, I had the paper sitting in front of me like that, and they said, "Okay, here's where you're going to sign for the treatment on your eye. You're going to do a radiation treatment." Basically, they bent my eye. This is going to gross people out. They bent my eye forward, and they attached a little radiation plaque on the back of my eye, on the retina, and then kind of let the eye kind of naturally go back. So for a while after this happened, I had like 2 frames, almost like TV frames, as my eye gradually healed, right? But getting back to the paper, there was this radiation treatment, and there's this thing called enucleation was also an option. And I didn't like the idea of having radiation having being done in my eye, so I thought, well, what's this enucleation thing? And they said, well, we take out your eye. We throw it away. I opted for the radiation. And I thought, but I remember thinking about, what if I lost my eye? That's horrible. And it would just be a terrible thing to go through and miss something. And I think of these people that had these problems with their legs and their arms and possibly eyes too, and they were blind and couldn't see, and Jesus just heals them. And man, that must have been mind-boggling. And so they're sticking around, they're being there. And so you have a situation where they're there and Jesus calls his disciples. All these great things are going on, and he calls his disciples to him. Verse 32. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they've been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. and I'm unwilling to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. And the disciples said to him, where are we to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed so great a crowd? And Jesus said to them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7, and a few small fish. And directing the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. Great story. One of the things that's amazing about this is that, if we want to get a picture of how it must have been for Jesus, all we have to look is on the news right now, anytime, and if you can get away from coverage of the election, you find out that over in Europe, all these people, crowds of people, that are leaving their countries and trying to find a better country up in Northern Europe. And you see these people crowding on trains, fighting to get on trains, fighting to go where it might be a little bit better. And our heart kind of goes, oh man, I wish we could do something. There's a lot of problems with that, because a lot of them are jihadists and terrorists, and we don't know who is and who isn't, and we don't know what's going on. We don't know why they're leaving, where they're from, all that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of problems with it, but our heart probably looks at them and go, man, I feel sorry, especially when we see the children and the different things going on. And I know I feel that way. I just feel sad about it. I don't know what this thing is, and maybe we pray about it sometimes. Jesus had compassion. Jesus had this compassion. He saw these crowds of people that had carried some of these people there, laid on the ground, slept, and were there 3 days just to soak in whatever they could from Jesus. And he says, I have compassion. Now, compassion is a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow. We understand it, but it also means accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the pain and remove its cause. That's what compassion is. You want to take away that pain and remove its cause. And that's the heart of Christ. That's the heart of Jesus for us. So, Jesus had always had compassion on people. Now, we look back, I think we mentioned this a couple of studies ago about Jonah and how Jesus had compassion on the city of Nineveh way across the desert up in Iraq. And he had told Jonah to go there. And God had said to Jonah, should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who do not know their right hand from their left? Jesus' compassion on people who don't have the message and who need help with their pain. And so here's these people hungry. And even though Jesus had healed them and done great things, he's still wanting to take care of every need. That's a kind of a beautiful lesson for us, Jesus wants to save our soul. He wants to take care of big things in our life, but he also wants to provide every day of our life. He wants us to trust him for that. And these people were there trusting him. And so, it's quite a thing. They'd been there for 3 days and without food. And I thought of myself, I actually went 3 days without food one time. And it was really tough because I was carrying a backpack. Not this nice. And I'll tell you the story, but there's a lot of detail to this story, but just a small part of it. I was up by the Canadian border, so picture this. We're up by the Canadian border, and I have a week off from our band was traveling around, and I decided I wanted to go see Evangeline. And I didn't have any money, 0 money, or maybe a few dollars, but not much. And the only way to get to was hitchhiking. So I was in Great Falls, Montana. You can Google that. And I hitchhiked from Great Falls down to Phoenix. And it's only about that far on the map. So, that far on the little map. We got the big map of the United States, so it's that far. And I remember I thought it would be easy, but I wasn't getting rides. And I remember this one time I was told there was a truck stop 10 miles out of this one town in Idaho Falls, and I walked 10 miles, and I went out there, and the truck stop was closed down. And it was dark, and so I slept in the ditch, and and then the next day I got a ride a little ways, and that night I slept in the ditch again. And the third night we traveled overnight with this guy that was fleeing the police, and I finally got to feed him 3 days later, and I really hadn't eaten. And the one thing about it I remember is that the backpack felt so heavy. When I left, it was nothing, but by 3 days, it felt heavy to carry that. I was tired, and it was heavy on me, and all of a sudden I realized, man, I'm super hungry. And I got into the gas station, and I was super dirty too, and so I kind of relate to this. I got an experience that would kind of relate to being 3 days sleeping on the ground, or at least 2 nights that I slept on the ground. But it worked out for me, so I'm thankful for it. Don't feel sad for me. I've had a good life.
Got the girl.
I got the girl. Yeah, that's right. But then even that was even instrumental in that. So it was kind of cool. Anyway, just relating to this, they're sleeping on the ground, and Jesus gets concerned about them, and he knows that he says they're going to faint on the way. I'm unwilling to send them away hungry lest they faint on the way. And we see the great miracle, and we can read more about that, the great, multiplying the fish and the loaves again, like he already had. But just to see the compassion he had, not only on the woman, but on all these people that he wanted to meet every need that they had. And I see so much of Christ in here, and it's just a great thing to see the compassion of the Lord for these people and the way he did that. But I'm thinking about, our knowledge of Jesus. We know Jesus, we love Jesus, we found truth in Jesus. And I was thinking about these people that had come, these 4,000 men plus women and children that had come there. And I was thinking, do we have such love for people that we continue to bring their situation before God? We continue to bring them to Jesus, to show them Jesus. Are we willing to bear the burden of other people so that they see Jesus? Would we continue with Jesus for 3 days to our own hunger and discomfort just to be close to him? There's a lot we can see here that just shows that these people were hungry for Christ. And they weren't even the people Jesus had come for. And looking at the woman, going back to the woman for a second, this woman that had come to Jesus, she wasn't there about herself. She said, "Lord, have mercy on me," right? That's her words. But it wasn't really about her. She was there for her daughter. Because her daughter was demon-possessed. Her daughter, and she'd heard that Jesus had the power to cast out demons, so she was not going to be dissuaded from coming to Jesus. Would we have that same patience and determination, tenacity, and persevere to ask Jesus for help like that? Do we continue like that? Would Jesus say to us, "Wow, you have great faith in your prayer and your determination to bring people to me"? There's so much in here that is moving about, not only about Jesus' compassion, but just about the faith of these people and their hunger for Jesus. That they forgot about their own needs. They didn't go after a day, and I got to go home and take care of myself. It was all about Jesus. So we learn a lot about commitment, about perseverance. And I just named a few things there that I just see as the way we need to come after Jesus, the way we need to persevere in prayer, and also the way we need to care about others, to bring them to that place of Christ. I know I've asked some rhetorical questions in a way, but it kind of reminds us of, what this is all about. I just think of these people coming onto that mountain in the desert and hanging out because Jesus is there. And I know sometimes in my life I don't try that hard to be in God's presence. Yeah, I don't. And so this is a moving thing. And then this woman, the way that she wasn't discouraged. And sometimes we get past Jesus and we feel like he's ignoring us. Ask God for something, feels like he's ignoring us. And she keeps on asking it because she knows who he is. She has faith in who he is. We have that same kind of faith in who he is, and we keep asking because we know that's where the power is going to